The New Orleans Saints made a really interesting decision this Monday morning, not picking up Cesar Ruiz's fifth-year option for the 2024 season. Let's talk about that and why I think it's the right move right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, everyone? It's Chris Voglu of the Straight Up Saints podcast, and this podcast is brought to you by the Scott Vicknair Injury Lawyers. Have you been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore? Scott Vicknair handles it all. Give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. So I announced it at the very start in our teaser. Cesar Ruiz doesn't get his fifth-year option picked up. Interesting decision. It's definitely one that will have Saints fans talking for the majority of this Monday. Is it the right move? Is it the wrong move? What does this mean? We'll get into all of that, but let's just start off with the basics right here. By not picking up Cesar Ruiz's fifth-year option, that means Cesar Ruiz is essentially entering a contract year, a prove-it year. Everything's on the line for the former Michigan first-round pick. And it makes a lot of sense, right? This is a player who first 2 years struggled to kind of find his place in the league. Third year, I thought had a really nice season out of all. When you take into consideration everything, I thought he showed drastic improvement. There were no longer those head-scratching mistakes that we've kind of become accustomed to seeing. So that was definitely great to witness. And then, unfortunately, all the improvements kind of get overshadowed by a Lisfranc injury that ends his season and cuts it short. So by not picking up the fifth-year option, like I said, the Saints are going to make Cesar Ruiz go out and earn that money if he's going to get paid by them or some other team in the NFL. And I know there is that kind of scary part of the uncertainty, right? Not knowing whether or not you have offensive guards. And this is something we talked about when the Saints earlier coming into the draft, we said had to get offensive line because you might very well lose Pete and Ruiz next year, which means you'd have no guards. And that's a scary thing. So I think for New Orleans, they always knew that was coming. Obviously, that's not much of a surprise to them, you would have to say, because if you look at what they did in the draft, they go out there and get Nick Saldiveri, and he's supposed to be that interchangeable offensive line piece that you can kind of move around and preferably have at guard. So let's go back to Ruiz. Is it the right move? Is it a wrong move? I mean, I think the safe answer is to say, time will always tell us. And that's something I like to say a lot, obviously, because it's just the more logical approach to things. I can't predict the future. The future will kind of unfold in front of us, and then we'll get the answer. But if I am going to predict, then I'm going to say, hey, what's my opinion on this? I think it's absolutely the right move. I think there's no scenario where you're New Orleans and you've had an offensive guard who's played 3 years, has only had one good year, and in that one good year, it ended with him getting a serious Lisfranc injury. I don't see how you pick up that fifth-year option and all of a sudden for 2024, he's on the books for $14.175 million. Over $14 million on the books. You can't change that. And that's the type of move that if the Saints made and Ruiz, let's say, falters this next season, he's on the books. And there's no way to move that around. It's just a bad business decision. Where on the flip side, if Ruiz plays well, yes, there's like oh man, he's a free agent. What happens next? But guess what? The Saints can always go out there and they can pay him if they want, and they can do it on their terms. They can figure out how to maneuver the salary cap number. It's a little bit more fluid. And let's say none of that works, right? And the Saints make a mistake. There is that bailout option of the franchise tag, albeit it's expensive, but that gives you more breathing room to maybe get a deal done. So that's probably the route you do not want to go. But I think it's a situation where the Saints made the right call. And I'll tell you why I also think it's the right call. I think if the Saints were to come out here and pick up Cesar Ruiz's fifth-year option, despite only having one good season, has dealt with an injury rookie year, third year, obviously his first and 2 years weren't really productive. To do that, I think you are picking up his option only on merit, on the fact that he is a first-round pick. And I think that's how bad teams operate. You know how bad teams operate? I don't know if you guys remember, but when the Panthers traded for Sam Darnold, they traded a second, a fourth, and a sixth to the Jets. Obviously, that trade seems ridiculous now. On top of that, not only did they trade for Sam Darnold, they picked up his fifth-year option immediately. And they noticed as that first year with him went on, man, he's not that good for us. And guess what? no matter what you say, no matter what you see, it doesn't change the fact that he's on the books for 20 plus million next year because you picked up his 50-year option. So that's how bad teams operate. The Saints, I think by doing this, it's absolutely the right move. I know there is that kind of uncertainty. There's that scariness, but look, man, I kind of like the idea if it's like, hey, Ruiz and Pete, we got room for maybe one extension. Maybe one extension is being handed out to one of you. It's definitely not going to both of you. And you got to compete your ass off. And you got to go out there and put in a strong showing and really be able to commit and show the Saints that you can be their guard for a long time. And I think the more likely scenario would be Ruiz and Pete would move on. So we'll see. But I think that Ruiz played pretty well last year. And I would like to think that this will be kind of maybe a little bit of a motivational thing for him as well. That's not obviously why the Saints did it. The Saints did it because it's the right business move. But I think for Ruiz, you could put this on that kind of bulletin board, look at it every day when you go into the facility and know that you're fighting for something. And you might get rewarded if you end up coming on top and doing your thing. So we'll see what happens with the Saints and Cesar Ruiz. But I think without a doubt in my mind, the right decision was not picking up the 5th-year option, and I commend the Saints for making that right decision, at least as of now. But I'm interested to know what you guys think. As always, let me know in the comment section below on YouTube if you're listening to this video. If you're not, you're listening to this audio format, obviously just hit me up on Twitter if you would love to chat Saints and talk about this. You guys know I'm always down for that type of conversation. And before I go, I think it is worth noting that the 2020 draft class, for the New Orleans Saints, boy, it looks terrible right now. You have Ruiz, who didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. You have Zach Bond, who barely plays. You have Adam Trautman, who got traded, and by the way, requested a trade. That was ridiculous to me. I have no problem with players requesting trades. I have a problem when a player who doesn't live up to their billing gets overshadowed by an undrafted free agent who was actually a wide receiver and then switched over to tight end, acts like the team is to blame. I don't see how that is. And I was a big fan of Adam Trautman coming out of the draft. Little disappointed by the way the 3 years in New Orleans shaped out. Just very disappointing. Anyway, you have Trautman and then Tommy Stevens, who's now in the CFL. So I think it's fair to say that ended up being a bad haul for New Orleans. Ruiz could be the saving grace if he uses this year as kind of that stepping stone to becoming their long-term guard and solidifying a contract extension next offseason. But we'll see what happens. And as always, guys, if more news breaks, if anything else comes out, we'll have it here for you on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation.